I remember it like it was yesterday, Tuesday, just another one of those routine days. The kind where you don't expect anything to change. The emails, the to-do lists, the mundane routines that make up a normal life. It was a workday. My son, Taylor, was sitting at the kitchen table, struggling through his homework with all the enthusiasm of a sloth. The coffee machine hummed in the background. It was supposed to be a normal day. But life has a way of twisting your reality when you least expect it. I didn't see it coming. No one ever does, right? I was sitting in the living room, casually scrolling through bills on my laptop, when I saw the notification. Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold. Confused, I clicked on the message. My first thought was that it was a mistake. Taylor's college fund had been built up over 6 years of careful saving, 6 years of discipline, my and Melissa's agreement that this money was untouchable. No reason to touch it. But when I opened the account, there it was. The shocking truth, the account was empty. Zero balance. I couldn't breathe. Panic set in. I immediately tried calling Melissa. No answer. Not even a voicemail. That sick feeling in the pit of my stomach only grew deeper. Maybe she forgot to transfer something, or maybe I was missing a detail. But as I sat there staring at the screen, the weight of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a mistake. I tried to stay calm, but the panic was bubbling up in my chest, making it harder to think straight. What the hell was going on? I logged into the account again, checking every transaction for the last year. There were no signs of fraud. Everything looked normal at first glance. Then it hit me. There were no transfers, no withdrawals, except for one. It was a recent transaction, made just a few days ago. A withdrawal for the full amount of the fund. My mind raced. I kept telling myself that there must be some mistake, some logical explanation. I stared at the account balance for what felt like an eternity, willing it to change, but it didn't. I kept clicking back and forth between the account history and the transaction details, hoping for something to make sense of all this. But nothing did. My heart was hammering in my chest. This wasn't a small mistake. Someone had emptied the account. The room felt smaller as the implications hit me all at once. Taylor's college fund, the one Melissa and I had agreed was untouchable, was gone. It was gone. And I was sitting here, frozen, unable to comprehend how this could have happened. My mind kept spiraling, trying to make sense of it all. I dialed Melissa's number again. Nothing. Not even a ring. My fingers felt numb as I fumbled with the phone, calling her work, her cell again. Still no answer. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, knocking over the coffee mug I had been nursing, sending a small splash of cold coffee across the table. I grabbed my jacket, my hands trembling as I tried to collect myself. There had to be an explanation. Maybe she had forgotten, maybe she had been planning something with the money, but I had to know. I couldn't wait around anymore. I couldn't just sit here pretending everything was fine. I had to confront her. I grabbed my keys, my mind racing with the worst possible scenarios. I had no idea where she was, but I had to find her. I had to find out what was going on. The drive to our house felt like an eternity, but I couldn't stop thinking. How could she have done this? Why would she? Melissa and I had always been on the same page when it came to money, especially when it came to Taylor's future. I couldn't wrap my head around it. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. The garage door was closed, the car parked in its usual spot. No sign of her. I went inside, calling out for her, but there was no response. I checked the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom. Empty. The sick feeling in my stomach only deepened. She wasn't here. Her purse was gone. Her jacket was gone. The sudden absence of her things in the house was overwhelming. Melissa had left. And I was left standing there, confused, angry, and completely blindsided. She had taken the money. And she was gone. The anger didn't hit me immediately. First came the numbness. I walked around the house, looking for any signs, any clues as to where she had gone. My mind was spinning. I replayed every conversation we'd had in the last few days. There was nothing that could have tipped me off to what was happening. It felt like she had been playing a different game this whole time, and I was the last to know. But then, as the realization set in, the anger came. It hit me like a ton of bricks. How could she do this to us? To Taylor? To me? I had worked so hard to make sure we had a solid future, and now it was all gone, just like that. I could feel my hands tightening into fists, my chest tight with frustration and betrayal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. But instead, I stood there, silent, trying to hold it together for Taylor. He didn't deserve this. None of this was his fault, and yet here I was, completely powerless, watching everything crumble. I tried calling Melissa one more time, but this time, I left a message. My voice was shaking as I spoke, but I tried to keep it steady. I needed answers. I needed to know why. I wasn't sure what I expected. A confession? An explanation? Some kind of apology? I don't know. But as I stood there, waiting for some sign, the phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, I almost didn't pick it up. What could she possibly say? What could she say that would make any of this okay? But I answered anyway. Mike? Her voice was quiet, distant, almost like she didn't want to say what I already knew. Where are you, Melissa? I asked, my voice tight with anger. She hesitated for a moment. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I thought I could fix things without you knowing. Fix things? You stole our son's future, Melissa. My voice cracked as the words came out. I could barely believe I was even saying them. There was a long pause. I didn't know how else to handle it, she said, her voice barely audible. I had no choice. No choice. I repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. You had no choice but to steal from our son's future? From us? Where are you? I can't come back, Mike, she said. Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I've already made my decision. And just like that, the call ended. She was gone. And I was left standing in the wreckage of my life, trying to figure out how the hell I was going to put it all back together. I stood there, staring at the phone for a long time after she hung up. It was as if the world had stopped moving for a moment, and all I could hear was the deafening silence of the empty house. I replayed her words in my head. I had no choice. How could she say that? How could she justify what she had done? There were no answers, no clarity, just a sense of betrayal so deep it felt like it was suffocating me. I walked around the house aimlessly, my feet taking me from room to room, but my mind was a million miles away. How had I missed the signs? How had Melissa pulled this off without me noticing? We were supposed to be a team. I thought we were on the same page, making decisions together, sharing everything, including the future we were building for Taylor. And now, in one fell swoop, she had taken it all away. The house felt foreign to me now. The walls that once felt like home, the rooms that held memories of laughter, family dinners, lazy weekends, they all seemed so distant now. The life I thought I had was shattered, and the person I thought I knew was gone. I couldn't even bring myself to go into Taylor's room, not yet. It felt like a betrayal to even consider that he was part of this mess. How was I supposed to explain this to him? How was I supposed to tell my 10-year-old son that his mother had stolen from him, from his future? The thought of shattering his world like that made my stomach twist into knots. He deserved better than this. He deserved stability, peace. Not whatever the hell this was turning into. But I couldn't avoid it forever. I had to face him. I had to be strong for him, even if I felt like I was crumbling inside. I walked into the kitchen, not sure what I was even looking for. I needed to do something, anything to distract myself from the mess. The countertop was cluttered with the remains of our daily lives, empty coffee cups, bills, half-eaten takeout. Nothing felt normal anymore. The phone buzzed in my pocket again, pulling me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, expecting to see another call or message from Melissa, but it was from Taylor's school. The principal. My heart skipped a beat as I pressed the phone to my ear. Mr. Daniels? The voice was polite but firm. We need to talk about Taylor. He's not been himself lately. I felt a cold chill run through me. Taylor? Not himself? I had been so wrapped up in my own mess that I hadn't even considered how this whole situation might be affecting him. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He's been very withdrawn. Quiet. His teacher said he hasn't been engaging in class the way he usually does. He's been off. Have you noticed anything at home? The principal's voice was tinged with concern. I had noticed, but I hadn't connected the dots. Taylor had been distant lately, but I had just chalked it up to school stress or the usual ups and downs of childhood. I hadn't thought it might be something more. I'll talk to him, I said, my throat tight. I think that's a good idea, the principal replied. If you could come by tomorrow to discuss it further, that would be great. I hung up, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. I had been so consumed by what had happened with Melissa that I hadn't stopped to think about how this was affecting Taylor. I needed to do better. I needed to be the father he deserved, even if I was falling apart at the seams. I walked to Taylor's room, my heart pounding in my chest. I knocked lightly before pushing the door open. He was sitting on the floor, his back to me, staring at something on his tablet. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his face, but he didn't turn around. Hey, buddy, I said softly, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't respond at first. It was like I wasn't even there. Taylor, I said, stepping into the room and sitting down next to him. Are you okay? He finally turned his head to look at me, and for a brief moment, his eyes locked onto mine. There was a strange emptiness in them, a kind of detachment that I wasn't used to seeing in my son. It was as if he was holding something back, something he wasn't ready to share. I'm fine, he said, his voice quiet, almost too quiet. I didn't buy it. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging between us. I had no idea how to start this conversation. How do you talk to your kid when everything in your life feels like it's falling apart? I wanted to tell him everything, to somehow explain what had happened with Melissa. But I knew that wasn't the right thing to do. He didn't need to carry this burden. Is there something you want to talk about? I asked gently, trying to keep my tone calm and neutral. He shrugged, his eyes back on his tablet. I don't know. I reached over and gently took the tablet from his hands, setting it aside. He didn't protest, just stared at me, waiting for whatever I was going to say next. Listen, Taylor, I began, my voice thick with emotion. I know things have been tough lately. And I'm sorry. You're probably feeling a lot of things right now, and that's okay. But I need you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Always. He looked at me then, his gaze intense, like he was trying to read me. Are you mad at Mom? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't mad at Taylor, not at all. But how could I explain my feelings about Melissa without making Taylor feel like he had to choose sides? No, I said after a moment, taking a deep breath. I'm not mad at your mom. But she made some choices that I don't understand. And sometimes, when people make bad choices, it can hurt others. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You're not to blame for this, okay? He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. He had always been the quiet type, the kind of kid who kept his feelings to himself. But I knew my son better than anyone. I knew when something was wrong. And I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than he was letting on. Hey, you don't have to talk if you don't want to, I said, trying to ease the tension. But just know that whatever you're feeling, it's okay. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here. He didn't say anything more. Instead, he just gave a small nod and picked up his tablet again, retreating into the world he had created for himself. I stood up and left the room, closing the door quietly behind me. I was still no closer to understanding what had happened, what was going on in Taylor's mind, or how I was going to fix all of this. But I knew one thing, I had to be there for him. No matter what. I couldn't let him go through this alone. He needed me. And I needed him too. The days that followed felt like they were moving in slow motion, each one dragging on longer than the last. I was still reeling from everything that had happened, but now, more than ever, I had to focus on Taylor. Melissa's betrayal and disappearance loomed over me, but I couldn't let that consume me. Not when my son was showing signs that he was struggling too. I spent my days working, though I was hardly productive. The tasks piled up, emails remained unanswered, and every time I sat at my desk, I found myself staring blankly at the screen. My mind kept drifting back to the mess that Melissa had left behind. The emptiness in the college fund. The coldness in her voice when we spoke on the phone. I couldn't shake the image of her walking out of the door, taking everything with her, everything I thought we had. And yet, through all of it, Taylor was what kept me going. I had to hold it together for him. The first few days after the phone call were the hardest. I had to call the school, explain that Melissa wasn't coming back, and figure out how to keep things normal for Taylor. I spoke to his teachers, his counselor, making sure they were aware of the situation. They were kind, but I could tell they were worried. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells around me, as if they were afraid I might break at any moment. I probably would have, if it weren't for Taylor. He needed me to be strong. At night, when he went to bed, I would find myself sitting in the kitchen, a glass of water or whiskey in hand, staring out the window. The house was too quiet. It felt like a shell of what it once was. I couldn't even bring myself to clean up the mess Melissa had left behind. Her things, her clothes, her shoes, her half-empty bottle of perfume, were still scattered around the house, as if she had just stepped out for a moment and would come back any second. But she wouldn't. One evening, I decided to go through the paperwork, bills, old documents, things that had been left untouched for a while. It was a way to distract myself, to feel like I was accomplishing something, anything. I sorted through files and receipts, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my gut. That was when I found it. Tucked in the back of a drawer, hidden beneath a pile of old receipts, was a letter. It wasn't from a bank or a utility company, it was from a lawyer. I felt the air rush out of my lungs as I pulled the letter from the envelope. My heart started to race as I scanned the words. It was a divorce petition. From Melissa. She had already started the process. She had planned this. She hadn't even had the decency to talk to me about it, to explain why she was leaving. Instead, she had gone behind my back, contacted a lawyer, and filed the paperwork. I sat there, the letter in my hands, my mind whirling. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been preparing for this day while I was sitting here, thinking everything was fine? I threw the letter on the counter, my hands shaking. It felt like a punch in the gut. Everything she had told me, everything she had said to me over the years, had been a lie. How had I been so blind? How could I not have seen this coming? I couldn't sit still anymore. I paced the living room, my mind a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and hurt. I wanted to call her, scream at her, demand an explanation. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had made her decision. She had already chosen a life without me. The next day, I took Taylor to his school as usual. But something was different. He was quieter than usual, barely speaking to me as we drove. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him too. He was trying to be strong, trying to hold it together, but I could tell he was falling apart on the inside. I couldn't blame him. I was falling apart too. After I dropped him off, I had a meeting with the principal to discuss Taylor's behavior. I didn't know what to expect, but when I arrived at the school, they had already prepared a report on him. His grades had slipped, his focus in class had waned, and he was becoming withdrawn. His teacher had even noticed he was making fewer friends. It wasn't just about the grades, it was the way he was starting to isolate himself, the way he was retreating into himself and shutting the world out. I spent a long time with the principal and the school counselor, trying to figure out how best to support Taylor through this. I knew he was scared, confused, and angry. And who could blame him? His entire world had been turned upside down. I promised them I would keep an eye on him, talk to him more, and make sure he had the support he needed. When I picked Taylor up that afternoon, he didn't speak much. He wasn't acting out, but he was distant. His eyes seemed to be somewhere else, like he was in a different world. I tried to engage him in conversation, asking about his day, but he gave me short, almost robotic answers. I knew he was hurting, but I didn't know how to reach him. I didn't know what to say to make it better. That night, after dinner, I sat down with him in the living room. I knew we needed to talk, but I didn't want to force him into a conversation he wasn't ready for. I wanted to let him lead it. I just had to be there for him, no matter what. "Taylor," I began softly, "how are you feeling about everything? You know you can talk to me, right?" He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. "I don't know, Dad," he said quietly. "It just doesn't feel real." I nodded, understanding. "I know, son. It's hard. It's going to be hard for a while. But you're not alone in this. We're in this together, okay? He didn't say anything at first, but then he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. And in that moment, I realized something important. Taylor didn't need me to have all the answers. He just needed me to be there. To listen. To show him that, no matter how broken everything seemed, we would get through it together. That night, as I tucked him into bed, I sat with him for a moment longer than usual. I wanted him to know that it was okay to feel whatever he was feeling. He didn't have to bottle it up. He didn't have to pretend to be okay. And he didn't have to do it alone. The next morning, I woke up early, unable to sleep much. My mind was still reeling from everything that had happened, but I had a new sense of clarity. I couldn't let Melissa's decisions ruin everything for us. I had to stay strong, for Taylor, and for myself. As the day went on, I focused on what needed to be done, getting through the basics of life. I made a plan to see a lawyer, to start the process of making sure that Taylor's future was secure. I had no idea how I was going to get through this, but I knew one thing. I would protect Taylor at all costs. I would make sure he had the future he deserved, no matter what. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let Melissa's betrayal break me. It had already taken enough from me. It wouldn't take my son. Not now. Not ever. The days after Melissa's departure felt like they were dragging on forever, each one blending into the next, leaving me stuck in a cycle of confusion, frustration, and exhaustion. I was struggling to breathe through the weight of it all, but I kept pushing forward. For Taylor, I hadn't realized just how much of our routine had been defined by her presence until she was gone. The house felt empty. Too quiet. Taylor had always been a quiet kid, but now it was different. His silence was heavy, almost suffocating. I tried to be the rock for him, but I was falling apart too. There were moments when I would catch myself staring at the walls, wondering where it all went wrong. How had everything unraveled so quickly? How had I missed the signs? I kept telling myself that the only thing that mattered now was Taylor's well-being. I couldn't lose sight of that. I couldn't afford to fall apart, not when he was still trying to figure out how to cope with the wreckage of his world. His mother, his safe place, his constant, was gone, and I didn't know how to fix it. He wasn't himself. His teachers noticed it first. His grades were slipping. His focus was gone. But it was more than that. He had stopped participating in class, stopped joining in with the other kids. He had always been quiet, but this felt different. And it wasn't just the school. At home, he barely spoke to me. He'd stare at his tablet for hours, lost in some world I couldn't understand. He wasn't angry. He wasn't acting out. He was just distant. I tried to talk to him, tried to reach him, but every attempt felt like pushing against a wall. I would ask him how he was feeling if he wanted to talk, and he would shrug it off with a simple, "I'm fine." But I knew he wasn't fine. I knew he was struggling, and the worst part was that I didn't know how to help him. One afternoon, after I'd gotten home from another long, exhausting day at work, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the bills and papers scattered in front of me. I had been trying to keep everything together, trying to manage everything on my own, but it was starting to wear me down. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The truth was, I had no idea what I was doing. I was fumbling in the dark, trying to find a way to keep our lives from falling apart completely. That's when Taylor walked into the room. He stood there for a moment, his eyes downcast, his shoulders slumped. For the first time in weeks, he actually looked at me. "Dad," he said, his voice small, barely above a whisper. "Why did Mom leave?" The question hit me like a slap to the face. It was the one I had been dreading, the one I knew was coming but wasn't prepared for. My throat tightened as I tried to find the right words. "I don't know, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know why she left. She made some choices that I don't understand. And it's hard for me too. But you need to know that none of this is your fault, okay? You didn't do anything wrong." He didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there, looking at me with those sad, confused eyes. He didn't seem to buy my words, but I had to keep going. I had to make him understand that he wasn't the cause of any of this. I couldn't let him carry that weight. He was too young. "We'll get through this together, Taylor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He nodded, though I could tell he wasn't really hearing me. He was still processing it all. Still trying to make sense of the chaos in his life. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a small flicker of hope. He had asked the question. He wanted answers. And that was the first step. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be something that would be fixed in a day or a week. But we had to start somewhere. And that somewhere was me being there for him. Being the father he needed, no matter how lost I felt. A few days later, I made an appointment for Taylor to see a therapist. I didn't know if it would help, but I knew he needed someone to talk to. Someone who could help him navigate all the emotions he didn't know how to process. He wasn't angry. He wasn't acting out. He was just shutting down, retreating into himself. And I had to find a way to help him come back from that. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Lawrence, was patient. She didn't force Taylor to talk. She didn't pressure him. She just let him sit there, letting him know that it was okay to be quiet, that it was okay to feel whatever he was feeling. And slowly, over time, I saw small changes. He didn't talk much about what they discussed in the sessions, but I could tell that something was shifting inside him. There was less tension in his body, less of that heaviness that had weighed him down. But as much as he was starting to heal, I was still in the process of picking up the pieces of my own life. I had to deal with the reality of what had happened. I had to figure out how to move forward, not just for Taylor, but for myself. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I couldn't keep trying to figure out what went wrong with Melissa. She was gone. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. A week after the therapy session, I called a lawyer. I had put it off for as long as I could, but it was time to face the inevitable. I couldn't keep living in limbo, waiting for something to change that wasn't going to. I needed to protect Taylor's future, to make sure that he had the security he needed. And that meant getting the divorce process started. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I wanted. But it was necessary. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and phone calls. It was all so overwhelming, so draining, but I kept telling myself that it was for Taylor. It had to be. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about making sure he was okay, making sure he had a future that wasn't defined by Melissa's choices. The divorce papers came through a few weeks later. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at them, feeling numb. Melissa had already signed. I had signed. It was final. There was no going back. The life we had built together, the family we had tried to create, it was gone. And it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the end of a chapter one never wanted to close. But I had to. For Taylor. For us. We couldn't keep living in the shadow of what had happened. We had to find a way to move on. One night, after I'd tucked Taylor into bed, I sat in the living room alone. The house was quiet, the weight of everything settling in. I thought about what Melissa had taken from us, what she had left behind. But I also thought about what we still had. Taylor was still here. I was still here. And as long as we had each other, we could rebuild. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But I had to believe it was possible. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever understand why Melissa had done what she did, or if I would ever be able to forgive her. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting her choices define me. I was done letting her betrayal control my life. It was time to move forward. For Taylor. And for me.